Today's story is about one of Motown's most popular girl groups of all time. Although this group didn't have a strong identity as the Supremes, Mary Wells, or Martha Reeves. However, they will go down in history as Motown's first female group and the first to award the label with its first #1 hit single. Before we get started in today's video, let's be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and push that notification bell to stay up to date. Now without further ado, let's cue that intro. Gladys Horton enlisted among older Glee members at Inkster High School in the fall of 1960. Kathleen Anderson, Georgina Tillman, Juanita Coward, and graduate Georgia Dobbins will join Horton's group. Dobbins being the eldest and this being Horton's idea, they will be in charge of the group. They will struggle to select a name at first, as most groups do. While trying to come up with a name, one of the members jokingly stated, "We can't sing," which gave Horton the idea to call itself the Can't Singettes. By 1961, they had changed their name again to the Marvels, and earlier that year, the Five, they would compete in a local talent show event and they would finish in 4th place.
Gladys said, "We're gonna be in that talent show."
Gladys really wanted it, and she wanted it bad.
They asked the other music teacher, could they use the music room to practice some of their routines. Not only did they have the music memorized, the songs memorized, but dance steps.
The top 3 finishers was given an audition with Motown. Now the group school teacher, who encouraged them to compete in the talent show in the first place, and also encouraged the girls to audition for Motown.
So Gladys Horton said, "You really think so?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, you know, do you think you could get us an appointment with Motown?"
Mrs. Sharpley, she contacted Barry, and we had an audition with Barry Gordy.
They would listen and they would audition for Brian Holland and Robert Bateman, who would be highly impressed and refer them to Smokey Robinson and Barry Gordy.
The Motown producer who discovered Mary Wells was at the audition.
They knocked me out. And when I say they knocked me out, everything that everyone else that heard them didn't like is what I did like.
Now the group's second audition went pretty well since Gordy and Robinson was very quite impressed. Gordy, he would advise the group to write their own song in return, which they did. Dobbins, she would contact a local musician named William Garrett, who had an unfinished tune called "Please Mr. Postman." Garrett, he agreed to let Dobbins use the lyrics on the one condition, that if the song would become a hit, he would receive writing credits.
My piano player, William Garrett, had a whole bunch of songs, and he had this title, "Please Mr. Postman." She asked if she could have the title, and from there she went and began to start writing the song. Well, I was dating a guy, and he was in the Navy. And I was looking for a letter. I was standing by the window, and I was just standing there like that, waiting on the mailman, and the mailman was jumping through. And, started coming to me. "You don't have no letter today for me?" You see what I'm saying?
Now despite her lack of songwriting skills, Dobbins, she would take the song home, rework it to match the youthful style of doo-wop. Dobbins, she would leave the group in shock before the group's third audition because her family was increasing and her father didn't want her to continue a career in show business.
The girls were all underage, and Georgia's dad refused to sign.
See, he worked 2 jobs, Ford and the gas station. I was like a caretaker, and I had 6 brothers. Dad said no. I ain't mad at him, because Mama can't get up some days. But it hurt now. I ain't gonna tell no lie.
With Dobbins' departure, Horton found herself in control of all the group's decisions.
I said, "You're gonna have to take over for me." And so I taught her how to sing.
She said Georgia really told her, no, you can do it. You got the voice. And I thank Georgia to this day.
So she would enlist the help of another graduate, Wanda Young, to join the group. Following this, the group, they would practice to gain confidence in order to have their third audition in front of Robinson and Gordy. Gordy, he was taken away by the song and he agreed to sign the ladies if they agreed to change their name. All parties would agree that the name should be changed, and they changed their names to the Marvelettes. In July of 1961, Gordy, he officially signed the group to Tamala Records. And that following month, the group, they will officially record the song, which was produced by Brian Howland, Robert Bateman, and Freddie Gorman. Now this team was one of Howland's teams prior to the famous Howland Dozier and Howland Alliance. On August 21st, 1961, Please Mr. Postman was officially released. Now this track was accompanied by the Funk Brothers and the teenage Marvin Gaye, who played on the drums. That following year, they would produce another single to capitalize on the twist and dance craze known as Twist and Postman.
And then my mama said, oh, look, here comes the postman, a twisting down the avenue.
On November 20th, 1961, the group, they would release their debut album, Please Mr. Postman, which failed to chart. That next year, they would do what they had previously done in the past by rewriting a half-finished song to fit the group. Horton, she would take credit for writing this song, and this song was called Playboy.
Here comes that Playboy. Watch out, here comes that Playboy.
The group's next hit would come that next year with the release of Beachwood for 5789. Another hit single was released called Someday, Some Way.
I'm gonna tell you.
Now this song became successful due to an extensive radio play. That same year, they would go ahead and release a second album titled Playboy. Now during this time, several of the members were still in high school, and due to the group's fame and their schedule began to grow hectic, they had to quit school and become homeschooled. Now before they made this decision, they was promised tutors before leaving the school, but they was never given any. Now because the girls were so young and Horton was in orphan wards by the court, they was eventually taken in by Berry Gordy's older sister, Esther Gordy Edwards. Now Esther, she would drive the group to the Motown review events, and they would finish that year by releasing the song Strange I Know.
It's strange, I know.
That next year, they released 4 singles with Locking Up My Heart,
I put it up my guard. I'm locking up my.
Forever,
You can break my heart forever if you want to.
My Daddy Knows Best,
Promise many sweet things that they never intend to do.
and As Long As I Know He's Mine. That next year, the group's third album released titled The Marvelous Marvelettes. By early 1963, the group, they would become a quartet when Juanita Coward would resign due to a mental breakdown that was induced by stress for being on the road. By 1964, Martha and the Vandellas, along with the Supremes, was on the rise in Motown. Nevertheless, at the pinnacle of 1964, the Supremes, they would overtake as one of the label's most popular groups. That next year, the Marvelettes, they would release 3 singles with He's a Good Guy, Yes He Is,
He's a good guy, yes he is, just sweet as he can be.
You're My Remedy,
Remedy, oh baby, my remedy.
and Too Many Fish in the Sea.
Into each heart, some tears must fall.
By this time, Motown had employed choreographers, Charlie Atkins and Maxine Powell, who would refine the group's dance skills, while Powell would train the group to be more sophisticated. In 1964, Georgina Tillman would marry her long-term boyfriend, Billy Gordon, of the Contours, and Wanda Young would marry her long-term boyfriend, Buddy Rogers of the Miracles. At this point, Wanda, she would also alter her name to Rhonda Rogers. Tillman, who had battled sickle cell disease her whole life, was also diagnosed with lupus at the end of 1964. Tillman, she tried to keep up with the group's demanding recording schedule and excessive touring dates, but by early 1965, all of this had took a toll on her health, making it too much for her to deal with. Following her doctor's suggestion, she would stop performing music and work as a secretary for Motown. Now the group, they would continue as a trio after Tillman's departure. By Motown producers, Wanda's voice was more deemed suited than Horton's. Therefore, that was one of the groups to have two lead singers, but not only have two lead singers, they had two lead singers that got over with the crowd. Now that was very rare at this point.
Wanda became the voice of the Marvelettes, and she was dynamite. She had the charisma, she had the smile, she had the looks on stage, and she could really get a song across.
Very few times a group have been able to have two lead singers and make it work. And so yeah, they had a second life.
In 1965, the group, they would release two more hit singles with I Keep Holding On and Danger, Heartbreak, Dead Ahead. By this time, the trio, they had formed a strong relationship with Smokey Robinson, and they would soon produce two hit singles with him in 1966 with Don't Mess With Bill.
Don't mess with Bill. Don't mess with Bill.
And You're the One.
A closet full of black rags all tucked away.
In 1967, the trio, they would release his fourth self-entitled album, which peaked at 124 on the Billboard 200 charts and number 13 on the Billboard Top R&B Albums charts. Now this album produced two significant singles with The Hunter Get Captured by the Game.
Every day things change and the world puts on.
And When You're Young and In Love.
Spring in the air filled with love. There's magic.
That next year, Horton reconsidered her affiliation with the group after her first child was born with cerebral palsy. The group released a single by the end of 1968 titled My Baby Must Be a Musician.
Eyes that hypnotize, and all it takes.
This was the last single that featured Horton before she left the group for good. With Horton no longer present, Harvey Fuqua would introduce the group to vocalist Ann Bogan, who would later replace Horton. By the time Bogan arrived, Motown, that was a shell of itself. Most musicians, songwriters, and producers had left the label due to financial difficulties. During this time, the group, they began to struggle as a result of Motown's decision to focus on their top artists such as Diana Ross and the Jackson 5s. However, they were still going to release their fifth album titled Sophisticated Soul, which peaked at 41 on the Billboard Top R&B Albums charts. Now this album will give us 5 charted singles with My Baby Must Be a Musician, along with 4 other singles titled Here I Am Baby,
Here I am, baby, the one who's
Destination Anywhere,
if you insist, but where you wanna go, miss.
What's Easy for Two is So Hard for One,
And while we're walking, we can steal a little kiss in the dark.
and I'm Gonna Hold On As Long As I Can.
Time is running out on this call.
In 1969, the group released a 6th album called In Full Bloom. Now this album produced one hit single with That's How Heartaches Are Made.
They told me I was such a fool to love you.
Now around this time, Wanda, she became very unpredictable and difficult to work with as she was dealing with a multitude of personal issues and was frequently late for shows. During this time, Wanda, she also would battle a drug addiction.
But for Wanda, the high of performing slipped sharply into other highs.
Wanda became a user and abuser of drugs. And she became almost a gopher. That's what I call her. Because she went for anything that she could get high on.
It was an addiction, and you fear that they're gonna OD. But a lot of people in Inkster would console her and even contribute to her illness.
If we had a gig to do, Wanda would not show up. I couldn't go through too much more of that. It almost caused for me to have a nervous breakdown because she was just so out of control.
Ironically, every member has suffered from a traumatic experience.
Georgiana dropped out of the group because she had sickle cell.
Juanita had, they said, a nervous breakdown.
Wanda would drink and sometimes black out for days.
This was really a tragic set of circumstances. It's not the way that you want things to evolve when you're a pioneer of this wonderful kind of music. All of a sudden, they weren't recording anymore. The Marvelettes shouldn't have never died the way they died.
Wanda, she would record a solo album in 1970, which was produced by Smokey Robinson. Now, the album contained no members of the group. Now, even though it had no members of the group, and this was Wanda's solo album, Motown still decided to market it as a Marvelettes album, even calling it the return of the Marvelettes. Now, this album would peak at number 50 on the Billboard Top R&B Albums charts. Now, Anderson refused to feature on the album's cover as she saw this as disrespect to her and the group. The group was disbanded after the release of this album. Now, Anderson would temporarily work as a staff writer for Motown until 1972, when Motown would close Hitsville, USA doors and relocate to Los Angeles. Anderson, she would stay in her hometown after Motown left, while Wanda, she would relocate to Southville, Michigan. On January of 1980, Georgina Tillman, she would sadly pass away at the age of 36 from lupus complications. A few months later, several artists had sued Motown claiming that they was not paid their royalties. After given a deal by Motor City Records, the group, they attempted to make a comeback in 1989. However, Motown had lost the Marvelettes moniker at this time, and it was bought out by a guy called Larry Marshak. He would go on to form his own variations of the Marvelettes. When Gladys would go on to perform, she was forced to perform under the title Gladys Horton of the Marvelettes due to the group's name being already utilized.
Music industry can be wonderful to you. It can be cruel to you. After a while, people forget about you. You become unsung.
Indeed, the Marvelettes' legacy became so undervalued that a businessman named Larry Marshak began organizing groups of unknown singers and billing them as the Marvelettes. So eventually, Gladys hit the road on her own. That's when she found herself competing with Larry Marshak's version of her old group.
There were at least, 5 different Marvelettes groups running around under the same aegis, going out there, at very low prices.
They would go around and perform and even actually tell people that they were Gladys Horton, the original lead singer.
These other phony groups were performing for so much cheaper. It actually made it difficult for her to get the money that she deserved.
It's almost summertime. That means the reunion concerts will be gearing up. Everyone from Diana Ross and the Supremes to the Marvelettes. But before you rush out to buy your tickets, beware. The group you're paying for might not be the real thing. National Enquirer TV's Brian Blakely has the story.
I'm getting ripped off. They're downsizing my value. It's the love of the music that keeps people from complaining, I think.
Is it just about the money?
It's not just about the money. My pride has been hurt, but they've stolen my identity.
Groups like the Platters, the Drifters, the Coasters, and the Shirelles are also being denied the opportunity to perform the songs they made hits because they don't own the trademark on their group's name.
What would you like to say to some of these imposter groups?
Please go the other way. Stop telling people that you're Gladys Horton of the original Marvelettes or that you're one of the original Marvelettes.
Now, Horton, she would fight this for years until she was helped by Mary Wilson in 2006. Finally, a legislation known as the Truth in Music Act was introduced in 33 states. Now, this law prohibits singers and label owners from utilizing a group's name if none of the original members remain. Marshak was obligated to modify the names of his group to attribute to the Marvelettes. Horton and Anderson may have won the battle, but the war was far from over, as they found themselves in a long-term dispute over the ownership of the group's name.
We finally got this legislation that unless you have at least one original member in the group, you cannot call yourself by that name.
But for Gladys, that legislation came too late.
She couldn't get good legal help. You know, she didn't have any money. She had a son with cerebral palsy. Life was difficult for Gladys.
She was having a series of strokes. She had woke up one morning and her mouth was crooked. Kind of like she just got kind of ill overnight.
And she was in the hospital for a while, but a lot of it had to do with a broken heart, just being there, not being able to use her creativity, and it just kind of drained her life from her.
Horton would sadly pass away at the age of 65 by complications from a stroke in January of 2011. Georgia Dobbins, an original member, would pass away from a heart attack on September 18th, 2020 at the age of 76, while Wanda Roger would sadly pass away on December 15th, 2021 at the age of 78. The Rhythm and Blues Foundation had honored the group with a Pioneer Award in 1995, and in 2004, it was inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. That next year, the RIAA had recognized the songs Please Mr. Postman and Don't Mess With Bills as million-dollar sales, awarding the group 2 gold plaques. The group, it was nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2013, however, they didn't receive enough votes. The Marvelettes has been eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for over 30 years now, yet they are still not in.